Diminished chords can be very confusing, and it's a really tricky subject to get together because when you invert them, you keep having the same structure and it turns on your monkey brain. You stop really thinking about what's happening, which inversion you're on. You just start going into this symmetrical mode with the guitar. Today, we're going to clear up the air and learn how to use every diminished chord in a key. So let's take the key of C major. The first thing we want to do is separate the chords of C major and name them based on function. C major and A minor, my 1 and 6 chord, are what we call tonic. They feel like going home. D minor and F major are the subdominant chords. That just feels like distancing, like going somewhere, like you arrived somewhere else. I'm home, I'm at the store, I'm back home. G7 and B half diminished are dominant. They feel like you need to go somewhere. They feel like tension. So you start home, you go to the store, you get a phone call, the house is on fire, you gotta go home. But I went to a sad home. A minor, other tonic, right? Now there's another chord that's really weird. We're gonna think about it mostly as dominant, but it can also sound like tonic. E minor, the 3 minor, could be home, or it could be dominant. So it both pulls and doesn't pull. Very strange. Anyways, we can make diminished chords to move into each one of these sounds, and that's the concept we're going to learn today. How do I do that? Well, if I take the primary dominant of the key, G7, and I build a fully diminished chord starting with its third, starting on the note B, the third of G, what it gives me is a dominant flat 9 sound, meaning 1, flat 9, 3, 5, and flat 7, right? That's the sound of a G7 arpeggio with an added flat 9. Now, if I just play B diminished without that root, it's a rootless G7 flat 9. And that chord could be moved forward symmetrically. All the notes remain the same, but change position inside the voicing as I move it forward. But the way I'm going to think about it isn't B diminished, D diminished, F diminished, G sharp diminished. I'm trying to think about it B diminished first inversion, B diminished second inversion, B diminished third inversion. Why? Because I'm telling myself that diminished chords resolve a half step up to either major or minor chords, depending on what's in the key. In our case here, this one leads me to the 1 chord. Just like G7 led me to C, B diminished now is a substitution for G7 that leads me to C. Now what I want to see is inversions of C from each inversion of that B diminished. So here's my root position. First inversion, second inversion, third inversion. Now in context, I can use it in a 2-5-1 instead of the 5. Now here's something that's weird and cool. If I want to move to my other tonic chord in the key, A minor, I need an E7. That's called a secondary dominant, 5 of 6. It's just a dominant chord that pulls me towards A minor in the same way that G pulled me to C, meaning I have the tritone resolution, and also I have that root motion going up a fourth. Put those two together, you have. But now what I'm going to do is the same diminished substitution I did for G. So I'm going to look for a diminished chord built on its third. So here's my E. Third of E is G sharp. Here's that diminished 7 chord. Uh-oh. It's the same as B diminished, but I'm not going to think about it like B diminished. I'm going to think about it now as G sharp diminished because it leads me up a half step to A minor. Now let's learn how to use that. Here's the root position resolving. First inversion, going to A minor now. Second inversion, A minor. Third inversion, A minor. So every diminished chord of the tonic function is the same and can go two places. A great way to practice would be B diminished going to C major or A minor. Next one. Next one. Next one. Cool. So now I know one set of diminished chords. Now diminished only exists in three keys. Well, how? B diminished, C diminished, C sharp diminished, but when I get to D diminished, it already has the same notes as B diminished, right? Because I can move it this way. So all these keys move in parallel to each other. Now let's talk about subdominant chords and moving into them with diminished. Now, one we said is tonic, that's being home. D minor, two, is like going somewhere else. Think about like your girlfriend's house. Now think about A7, 5 of 2, like getting a phone call from your girlfriend saying, hey, my friend Jerome is coming over. You gotta go to your girlfriend's house to see what's happening, right? What's Jerome up to? So that A7, I can do the same thing I did with the G7. I'm looking for a diminished on its third. That C sharp diminished does the trick, right? It moves to that D minor. So I'm home, then I go, Jerome? I'm coming over. There we go. I got there. I created tension to move there. Now, what I need to do is learn how to invert that C sharp diminished, root position to D minor. First inversion, E diminished, go into this kind of D minor or this kind of D minor, depending what you need. G diminished, it's the next inversion, go into this D minor. B flat diminished to this D minor. Cool, so now I can move into my first subdominant chord, but I have another one, F. Any Johnny Cash song goes from 1 to 4, right? That's just going to another place, from your house to the store. C7 is the sound that pulls me to 4. It's the 5 of 4. If I do that same thing, build a diminished chord from the third of C7, I have E diminished. Oh shit, that's the same as C sharp diminished. Meaning the diminished chords that you use are based on function. The same upper structure diminished pulls you to all of your subdominant sounds. So C sharp pulls to D minor or F. If you're using it in place of a C7, that was just C, C7, F, F minor. That's a great thing to practice. So B flat diminished can go to D minor or to F. C sharp diminished can go to F or to D minor. E diminished can go to F or to D minor. G diminished goes to D minor or to F. And that's the 4 of them. Now, I know this is a lot of information. That's why we have it all tabbed out for you, notated on our Patreon, as well as a longer, more in-depth series with more examples, more time on each subject, and also 2 more uses of the diminished chords we're not gonna cover here because we're pressed for time. So to get to my 5 chord, I need to use 5 of 5, D7. I'm gonna do what I did with the other chords, build a diminished chord off its third, F sharp diminished. That leads me to G7, which leads me to C. So I can use that to get to G. I can practice that. C diminished to some inversion of G. E flat diminished to an inversion of G. F sharp diminished to G. A diminished to G. Now the other place that leads is 3 minor. E minor, I can practice that too, right? B7, if I use it in place of a B7, I get this D sharp diminished or E flat diminished, which leads to E minor, right? It can, just like the other diminished chord, it leads to one of them. Now, a lot of time in jazz, you don't really use a diminished chord to go to your 5 chord. It's just that sounds a little strange too. It's too much voice leading, right? It sounds like classical music when you go. I'm sandwiching diminished chords between inversions of a G7 sound. It's a good sound, but it's just out of style. But what you do use quite a bit is that one diminished sound is a suspension of the one chord. So what is a suspension? Here's a 2, 5, sus1. You arrive home, but something about the arrival feels incomplete, like the couch is in the wrong place, right? And then it's suddenly put in the right place by magic, right? So diminished one can do the same thing from the other side, right? You can have, if I'm using C diminished, 1 diminished, and then go to 1, it gives me that suspended feeling resolved. So 2, 5, 1 diminished, 1. So you hear it in people like Louis Armstrong's music all the time. Like if I go 2, 5. Django plays lines on a 2, 5, 1. That bluesy climb was just, I just went up C diminished and then resolved to C major. So that's a thing to practice, not just C diminished moving to G, but C diminished moving to C. That's a motion that you need to get under your fingers. So this is how you work on it. C diminished, C, C diminished, C, E flat diminished, C, F sharp diminished, C. You see that in blues, 4, sharp 4 diminished, C, and in gospel music all the time. If you don't know what that's doing, that goes 4, sus 1, 1, right? 1, A diminished, and back, right? You can get, that's a nice sound. So that's something you need to get together. Cool, we have all this information and much, much more, a whole series about it, tabbed out, notated for you on the Patreon. It's $5 a month, but if you don't feel like having a reoccurring charge, you can just buy these as separate lessons with tab for $5 each. Just go to our Patreon and check out what we got there. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.